All right, you'll see here what comes in your accessory bag for the rudder installation, and we'll get started. Here's the rudder servo that we set up earlier in video number 1. So make sure you get your grommets and spacers in there. You'll also see there's a little cutout in front of your rudder, so make sure you put your rudder servo in that way, being sure not to pinch any of the wires. And next we'll go ahead and get that fitted and pre-drill. You'll see we'll pre-drill all the holes, speed that up for you a little bit. And again, same thing. We're going to go ahead and put a little bit, just like we do everything, we're going to put a little bit of thin CA on those holes. That helps keep the wood from cracking and splintering when you put your servo bolts in there. So something I do on all of them. And go ahead and get that set up. Let that set up for a second, and then we'll go ahead and put the servo screws in. Now remember, again, this is the rudder servo. We set that up. We set the 90 degrees up earlier, and it's ready. It's already ready to be armed and adjusted here. So get these bolts put in, or get these screws put in, I should say, not bolts, but get these screws screwed down tight. Make sure that servo's in there nice and good. The nice thing about this kit is there's a nice thick piece of wood there for the rudder. Okay, here's a quick diagram on rudder pull system and the adjustable link that we're going to be making here. So here you'll see the 3.5-inch arm that we're using, and remember you have to use this link for the servo arm side, the one with the shoulder on it. Fits down onto the arm, makes a nice surface there. Here we're going to thread the pull link into the ball link. I like to use just a little bit of oil, just a tiny bit, to help cut that thread into your ball link. So we're going to go ahead and screw this in, and I like to screw it about halfway, that leaving yourself adjustment either way if needed. So okay, so we're going to make this slippable link next, and you'll see here step 1 in making that link right here, putting your 2 crush sleeves on there, just like that. Run the wire into the pull wire into the link, and then this is what that looks like. Your first loop, we'll make the first loop, and then we'll move to the next link, or the next loop, which we'll loop that back around into your crushable link, and you'll see that right here in step 3. This gives you a slidable, adjustable link. So you can see I'm just going to feed that back through the crushable link, just like this, sort of a trick there. Get that in there, and you can see here that will build yourself a link that you can move. So when you're making those adjustments before crushing it down, you can get that. You can make your adjustments there. So that's what that slidable link looks like. You're going to do that 4 times, both on the servo side and the rudder side. So, and obviously you're going to want to start at the servo side. Here you'll see I'm slipping on the other crushable link. This is just sort of a dual, making sure that doesn't slip. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, that we have that adjustment, we're going to use the non-serrated side of a pair of pliers or whatever to crush that link. Go ahead and crush that, and then we'll slide the second link on, and we'll crush that as well. So this will give you that unslippable type link, and this is we're working right now on the servo side. So I like to start at the servo, and then your wires are coming out the back, and we'll do that all over again on the back, doing your fine adjustments. Here I'm just going to take a little bit, not everyone does this, I like to take a little bit of thin CA and just put it on there. That just ensures, I don't like any of that ever to slip, so that just helps ensure that it's not going to slip. Here's both links on the servo side. I like to make them as similar as possible. And then you're going to go ahead and slide your heat shrink tubing on there that you slid on there prior to making the link, and then we'll get that heat shrunk, and now you've done your servo side, and both of these links are identical. That way they're easy to adjust. So here you can see right now the links are straight. I'm going to just go ahead and cross them just like that. So now they're crossed in the fuselage, and you'll see that here in just a second. You can see in this picture that they're crossed. You don't want them to be twisted or anything like that. So, and here we're going to go ahead and put the, you can see the washer is on top of that link. That'll keep that ball link from ever popping off of there. We're going to go ahead and just screw that down. Now, just for adjustment purposes right now, we're just going to screw these down. We're not going to lock them down permanently, but you're going to have to come back and put a nylock nut on there underneath. Okay, so now we're going to install the rudder control horns, and you can see here control horn, there's 2 slots towards the bottom of the rudder. You just find those slots with your finger, go ahead and just cut them out on both sides. Now this control horn, unlike the other control horns, is sort of a little more difficult and a little bit harder to set up. You have to make sure that it's equal distance on both sides. So as we're pre-fitting these, it's good to just take your time, pre-fit everything. But we are going to pre-fit these, and I'm going to put the base on like you see here. I'm going to slide those in, slide that control horns in, put the base on, and then we're going to trace that base, and then we're going to cut it out with a sharp hobby knife, and you'll see that here. Make sure we get that sort of slid forward, cut that out. Now that slot, as I'm cutting this out, I'll just talk about those 2 slots. Those 2 slots are they're slotted, and you can move that control horn forward or backwards in the rudder. You want to make sure that that control horn, and you'll see that in a minute, you want to make sure that that control horn is the hole is centered on the hinge line. That's where you're going to get your best geometry, so that's important. So here you can see, just like all the surfaces that we glued control horns on, we're just cutting out the ultra coat with a sharp hobby knife, get that out, make for a strong gluing bond there. Make sure you get that out. We're going to do that on both sides, and that makes sure that that base plate there adheres well. That way it's not adhering to covering. So get that cut out, cut it out again on that side. Now we're going to, there's the slots I'm talking about where that can move back and forth. But here, typical, now you're just going to sand this in the middle. Unlike the other ones, you sanded the base of them. This is in the middle because this control horn is glued in the middle. So a little bit trickier of a job here as far as gluing them. But get those all sanded up, get the bases sanded up, and then we'll move to pre-fitting and making sure that they're glued properly. So again, I like to just put the link, even more important in this particular one, I like to put the rudder control horn, I like to sort of put the link together, and this holds everything sort of centered. That'll keep you from getting those 2 links glued at differently, and then having to make adjustments after it's glued. It won't be easy. So make sure you sort of screw these together. You're going to put the base on one side. Actually, you're going to end up putting the base on both sides, but since I'm going to put the base on one side, and then we'll slide this in, and this is how you're going to glue it. So you got to glue it in from one side, and so this can be a little bit messy if you're not careful, but we're going to get this glued. Now the other really important thing here is to make sure you get that glued right in the center of the rudder and right on the hinge line. So just pre-fit it, make sure that you're sort of got that slot freed up. Here you can see all I'm doing here is I'm measuring the overall center to center measurement is 3.7575. Might be a little different for others, probably not, but and then I'm going to find the exact center here. And the reason I want to find that is because it's going to be important to, so half of 3.575 is 1.787. This gets you the center. So now what I want to do is I'm going to set this in here, and I'm going to make a little mark in the very center of the rudder. So right there in the very center of that rudder, this is going to give me a place to measure off of for each half. Now I'm sure everybody does this differently and has their different ways of doing this, but this will give me a measurement from the center of that hole to the center of the rudder. Now this will give you your side to side measurement. As you can see, is this link, this control horn can sort of rock back and forth in that slot, so you want to be careful when you're setting this up. So as you'll see here in a minute, I like to make just a little plywood jig that will hold everything. So it takes a little bit of time to make this, but it will guarantee me that I get this lined up perfectly center and the holes perfectly on the hinge line. So you're going to see that here in a minute. You'll see that how we make that. But right now, all I'm doing is just making sure that I'm fitting it and making sure I can get the center to center, understanding what that looks like as I'm pre-fitting everything. And you only get one chance to glue this. And it's very important that you get it right, because the geometry of your pull system matters. So here you'll see this is the little template that I made. You can see I got the two holes. I got the cutout there for the rudder. So that's the rudder, and then and that line that runs across there, that's the center line of the hinge. So you can see the hinge line is centered. So I just slip that on, slip the two control horn link bolts through that template, and then I just sit here and line it up, and you can see that'll hold it. That's going to hold it centered just like that, and it's going to hold it on the center line. And you're going to make sure that that link is level in both ways. And then I'm going to take a nut here, and again, I'm just pre-fitting right now, but I'm just going to take the nylock nut and bolt it on the back. But as you can see, everything is aligned up, and it's very easy to keep this in order, and that took me just a couple minutes to make that. So now we're going to go ahead and look at the gluing process. Obviously you're going to use 30-minute epoxy. You have to give yourself time to set this up. So once again, I'm going to slip the base on there, and then I'm going to get that ready to glue, and I'm going to put the bolt the link in there as well. On this particular side, we're going to start, you got 30-minute epoxy you're using, so we're going to start from this side. We're going to put that in there, or slide it in there, and we're going to leave it halfway out. And then we got to mix up our epoxy, because we're going to coat the surfaces with epoxy, and then we're going to slide it in. And you got to be careful not to get epoxy all over the place here. This can be, if you don't take your time here, this can be sort of a messy setup, but this is probably the most important thing that you're going to do on your rudder pull. So here I'm just getting some rubbing alcohol ready to wipe off any excess epoxy, but now we're just going to get epoxy set for this. And you'll see I'm just going to take my my thin carbon rod that I can get down in there, and we're going to get epoxy, and you want to make sure you get it in there good. This is hard. This can be a little bit difficult to get a good glue bond, so you want to just take your time, get the epoxy all set up, get it on the base, get it on the center of the control horn. Now I'm just going to push it through. You don't want to get push that down. We're going to go ahead and use that template here in a minute once we get this all set up. You see, I'm just going to go ahead and take a Q-tip and wipe off any of the excess epoxy. Use my rag to make sure that's nice and clean. Now we're going to do the same thing over here, but on this side I'm just going to sort of put some of that epoxy down in the holes behind that. You want to get as much epoxy in that slot as you can. You're going to need that. So I'm just going to put that epoxy down in there. And I'm going to get it on that bare wood on this side. Again, being careful not to get epoxy all over everything. Just keep getting that down in there. And then once we get that epoxy, now we're going to slip the base on. This is the other base. Now eventually I'll end up sort of clamping these two together once we get our little template, but I'm going to still put epoxy on the base. Get that a little bit closer so I don't get epoxy all over the control horn. We're going to just slide that up against the rudder, get both of those bases sort of pushed against each other, against the wood there. And again, everybody does this differently, I'm assuming. So we'll get this. Now we're going to wipe up all the excess epoxy and get this ready for setting up for the final drying process here. So we've done all the pre-fitting. Now we're going to put the link on the other side. Make sure those holes are all lined up, and then we're going to use our template. I'm going to go ahead and put the holes, the bolts through that template. And see, you got to sort of move it around because you're trying to get your center, and you're trying to get your hole on the hinge line. So you can see I got to sort of move it around here, speed this up a little bit for you. This can be a little bit of a tedious process. Had to trim some of that out of there. Okay, and here I'm putting on my bolts, and now it's bolted on. So now I can make a little bit of a side-to-side adjustment, or no side-to-side adjustment, but a little bit of an adjustment. And you'll see that here in just a second. I can just change the angle of that because of where I cut it to fit around the rudder. So again, just getting rid of all that excess epoxy. Now we're doing the final adjustments. And here I'm checking to make sure that my center is the same on both sides. So here you go. There's my center of my hinge line. You can see the square line I got drawn across there. And now we're going to go, I'm just going to double check that measurement and make sure that from my little mark I made that I'm the center of that to the center of there, center of that to the center of that hole. So we have a perfect alignment in that, and a real simple little jig that we made. I usually make that for every plane I build. And then what I'm going to do, once that's right, I'm going to clamp those bases together, pushing them together, and then you'll see we'll let that dry up. So here we are just installing the rudder. So just making sure that none of those hinges are binding. We're pushing that rod down through there. I like to put just a tiny bit of oil on that to make sure it's fits well. And we're going to slide that rudder pin all the way through there. And now what I'm doing after this control horn dried up, I'm just making sure that it's equal on both sides when I deflect the rudder. So you've seen it there at full deflection over here. It's perfect. It's set up and glued perfectly. So that worked very well. And then we're going to move to setting up the other side of the rudder pull cables. So here you can see that I'm going to tape the rudder, tape the rudder on there so it's at its zero position or its neutral position. I'm going to put the crushable links and your heat shrink tubing on there. We're going to start to adjust this link. Now at this point in the assembly, I have the radio on and the servos are armed. So the servo is at its center, its 90-degree center. I double check that. I'm just going to pull this link through and I'm going to duplicate that slidable link that we used earlier, that I showed you earlier, that step 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to go ahead and get this tight. I'm going to go ahead and pull that tight. I'll slide that in, and here's where I'm going to make that adjustable link. Slip it around, make that so it doesn't slip, and I'm going to try to get that sort of as close to my link as possible there. So you're just going to pull a little bit of that out so I can slide it up. And there you go. You're going to pull this tight. Now I got to do the same thing on the other side as we start to adjust the servo. So get this over here, and we'll go back and forth from side to side, and then we'll go ahead and crush this link here. So now we're set. Now we can go back, and once we heat shrink it on both sides and do all that, again, the thin CA, but once we get this set up, we still have adjustment in the rudder with these links. So we'll go ahead and untape. We'll do the same thing on the other side that I'm doing here. Get the heat shrink on. We'll go ahead and untape the rudder. And remember that the radio is armed, so we're going to go ahead and untape the rudder, and then we'll be able to set up our fine adjustment. So here's what that looks like. Okay, so now we're up front, and we're adjusting the rudder. Now you want to make sure you adjust the tension on these cables. You want them to be you want them to have a good amount of tension on them, but not too much where it's pulling on the servo all the time. You don't want to burn out a servo, but you do want to have a good amount of tension on them. You can see that right there. So make sure they're tensioned and make sure you have it pulled. Now here's where you're going to, don't forget the final step, to put your nylock nut on the bottom of this, because we didn't do that in the beginning. So on both sides, the servo arm and the rear here, make sure that we get that done. And that's it. Basically, a little bit of sub trim, or the goal is to get that rudder at zero, the neutral position without any trim. And here we're going to go to video number 5, engine mounting. So stay tuned.